Well, welcome everyone for the Q3 overview. So you will hear about the numbers for the first 9 months and especially the third quarter. And Anthony will also provide a forecast overview for Q4, where we're at the beginning of that. For those of you who haven't come to our summits, so our next one is coming up in April next year. Like last year, we do it in April again. We moved back to the Netherlands, to Huis te Duin, where I think many of you have been already a couple of times. So dates are April 13 to 15. You should have received a save to date, and you will receive the invitations probably early November, so the next 2-3 weeks or so. If by then you haven't received it, reach out to me then, because then apparently something went wrong, but normally you should get them. So that's our summits. The other summit I do want to mention, we have Singapore coming up. For those of you who would be interested to go there, feel free to sign up. It's on the website where you can find the registration page as well. You can also reach out to me. So that's our really next one coming up, but then in Asia. We have a lot of data, a lot of reports, podcasts on our Knowledge Hub. The latest one is the outlook for 2030 of tech distribution, which is there. There's podcasts every 2 weeks. There's a new podcast from Frank, which you may find interesting. A recent report on AI has been published, which you may find interesting. So again, if you want to have access to those reports, just go to the website. It's all for free, and I think it's really good, valuable stuff. Well, with that, let's move over to where we're all here for. So, Anthony, over to you, and give us the overview.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me again. It's great to be back in Q3. And so many familiar names on the participants, so nice to see you all. So as Peter mentioned, what we're going to look at today is by review Q3. We just had the data last week. So we're going to review Q3, the performance as usual, and put the number in perspective with the year-to-date numbers. And as well, I will spend some time looking at a forecast. And this quarter, I will do something a bit slightly different. I will also put our forecast in perspective with our channel surveys that we run every year, our channel watch survey, where we survey resellers across Europe. So that will be interesting to see how this is a market and what the number we are forecasting for the quarter and for the year to come. But let's start with Q3. As we are all eager to understand how did we finish Q3, calendar Q3. We started Q3 in July very well, plus 7%, plus almost 8% year over year on the distribution panel. Great start, obviously behind it. We have, as usual, the refresh of mobile computing, starting with the end of Windows 10, and mobile have been growing quite nicely in July. The same for software, the same for desktop, and as well as computing components. But as we can see, we have a more modest growth in August and September, here at 1.5 and 1.3. The main culprit, and that's what I'm going to highlight a lot during this webinar, was more on the software side. Software side, if we remember, especially on the virtualization software, with a Broadcom, VMware, new model, new pricing, we've seen tremendous growth starting last year. So last year, for example, virtualization in August, we've seen a growth of 96% year over year and 150 almost in September. So that's going to be that was an extremely difficult year-on-year compare. And we've seen actually virtualization in August at -18 and -26 in September. But what does this 3 months combined means for the overall quarter? We're finishing on another positive quarter. It's great news at 3.7% year over year for Q3. It's quite below our forecast. If you remember last time when I was there with you, or when we listened to our IT forecast briefing, we were planning to reach 5.3%. As I mentioned, software has been a very bad surprise for us. but we'll go that in more detail in a second. Year to date, still positive, almost close to a 5% year to date. 5% is a great number. We haven't seen that in the channel since 2022, if I remember correctly. So let's see if we can continue this in Q4. But let's now drill down into our value volume split. And here we're going to see the first red number of this presentation. On the value side, minus 1% in Q3. As I already mentioned, that's software behind it, but we'll go in more detail in our next slide. But the good news is what we're seeing on the volume side. Volume side, of course, the Windows refresh, of course, what's behind it is a PC refresh. And we see a growth of 6%. Actually, above our expectation that we set last quarter, we had a 5% plan for volume, and we exceeded that at 6%. But let's look into more detail on what's happening at top sector. Before that, we can see still the year-to-date number looks good on the green side, positive despite this last quarter for value, still at 5.2% year-to-date, and on the up for volume at 3.8%. But as I say, let's look first at our top sectors. The great news, and what we've been seeing for the past few months and a few quarters, is the continuous growth on the personal system side. 15% this quarter, great performance, and we keep getting surprised by how well desktop is doing. In July, we've seen 26% growth for desktop, 32% in August, and around 50% in September. So great performance for desktop, around 30% year over year, but notebook as well. Notebook being the largest category on this personal system at plus 13% year over year. Great performance. Overall, we know the refresh is happening. It may vary by country, and we'll look at the country later in this presentation. But the distribution channel is really boosted by this refresh and the end of Windows 10. If we keep looking at our volume category here in the sector, I mean, we can have a look at peripheral. Flat because of the very difficult year we're seeing in the print industry, both on the hardware and on the consumable. On the hardware, another very bad quarter, around minus 7% year over year. And on consumable, a bit better, but still at minus 2%. The only positive thing we're seeing in terms of revenue in the consumable side is on the ink side at plus 1%. But the good news for the peripheral and some other categories that have been struggling since the beginning of the year has been monitor. We know that budget has been mainly allocated to the refresh on the PC side, and monitor were a bit lagging behind. But we've seen some great pickup of activity here in our distribution panel in Europe in September for monitor, with a 7.3% growth. That meant that the monitor finished at plus 2% in Q3. So great trajectory, especially that we know that Q4 is usually strong for monitor. And last year was not so good for monitor in Q4. So we're expecting the trajectory to continue positively on this side. Finally, on peripheral, if I can highlight one last thing, is on the accessory size, doing well on the keyboard, on the mice, but it's docking station that's been growing at double digits in Q3 at 10%. Taking the peripheral overall at a flat level compared to last year. So let's move now to the value, and before going into the software, let's look at some more positive news in the infrastructure side, plus 4% here. And this growth is driven by the components. Components, if you attend our weekly webinar every Wednesday, we've seen components been growing quarter after quarter, month after month, week after week. And so no surprise to see that in Q3, components have been growing 33%. And it's not only your graphics card that have been growing at 44%, but it's also your processor and your RAM memory that have been doing extremely well. The appetite really to put components into data center, and the channel and the distribution being part of it is reflected in this number. Also talking about appetite for data center, on the storage side, we've seen a growth of 4% in Q3, especially when we look at internal drive. Internal SSD growing 23%, internal HDD at plus 33%. So we'll see like the AI driving a lot more need for storage, and we've seen that in the internal drive, both SSD and HDD. So why only 4%? Because we've seen some quite negative decline on the networking side, minus 11% in networking, and wireless minus 20%, and also server minus 1%. I know last year and this time of the year we had some big project on server, so it was always going to be a difficult compare. But networking really bringing this sector down. But overall, plus 4%. And as I mentioned already, software, very difficult August and September. I mentioned virtualization, but we're hoping for like the office application to really compensate this sector and to bring it a bit up, because office application have been growing this quarter at 25%, but that was not enough to save the software this quarter. What we've been seeing in software, even like security has been flat, and we've seen last year also some big deal on the data management software side that didn't happen again this year, and data management finishing at minus 4%. So a very difficult quarter for software, great quarter for personal system as expected. And if we look at the year-to-date data, that's what we are seeing here. We've seen personal system continuing on this acceleration at year-to-date, 11% double-digit growth for personal system. Great performance here year-to-date, and more to come in Q4, and I will share that later on when we look at the forecast. But actually, before moving to the forecast, I think this will be quite interesting to look at country performance, as we've seen some big numbers here, like especially for Germany. Germany minus 2%. Germany has been struggling, especially on the corporate reseller side. The sell to corporate reseller year to date from distribution to our corporate reseller channel, minus 9%. And it's across like few of the top 5 category. Software have been, as I mentioned, ever and again, minus 9%. But the key, and I already mentioned that, is print. Print consumable. Germany is a huge market in Europe for print consumable, and it's actually a top 5 category within our distribution panel for Germany, and we see a decline of minus 10% here in Germany. Obviously, we still see some good news on the mobile side, still growing at just around 8%, but it's not enough to save Germany this quarter on minus 2. We're saying that because we were looking at the start of the quarter already. We're seeing some good activities happening in Germany. Like in the first week of October, we've seen, for example, last week was the highest week for desktop, once again, in Germany. The highest week in monitor as well. So we're seeing maybe some optimism in Germany for Q4. But year to date, still at 2% growth. Another difficult situation is in Italy. In Italy, it's more the SMR channels that have been suffering. The SMR channels, that's a big route to market in Italy, like the main one, around 40-45% for distribution channel. And we've seen a decline of minus 2.5% in the SMR space. So tricky economic environment also in Italy. And the refresh is not happening as fast as other countries. We've seen just mobile computing growing 4% this quarter. And similar to Germany, consumable, especially in consumable, going down minus 10%, so driving the overall number for Italy in negative territory, and year to date at minus 1%. If we continue looking at the top 5, looking at the UK, flat in Q3, thanks to some big deal that we see on the infrastructure side, but also mobile. We know the refresh in the UK is happening faster, and we've seen a growth of 16% already. But once again, the story is software bringing this number down and finishing flat. And for the year, after a very difficult Q1, at just 1% year to date. But the good news in our top 5 is France. France plus 7%. We remember Q2 was extremely difficult. The political environment, the uncertainty was not helping. So we're expecting similar results for Q2. But however, the France grew 7% driven by finally the corporate reseller channel that been growing via distribution. Also, another channel that's been growing is that something we haven't seen so much in France, where distribution doesn't play such a big role as Italy, but retail has been growing as well in France. And retail, what's behind retail is obviously the mobile computing. But overall, for France, actually, mobile computing growing 11%, so quite positive. And on the software side as well, 20% growth after a difficult start of the year. But the main country in our top 5 that keep surprising us this year has been Spain, especially in Q3. That was the end of the digital kit, the incentive for business to purchase IT equipment. And we've seen that in this plus 16%. The retail chain actually growing at 34% this quarter, driven once again with mobile computing, but we also seen monitors doing extremely well, at plus 20%, and telco also. That's something we don't mention enough, 27% this quarter. For the rest of Europe, if we look quickly at Poland, it's more on the infrastructure side that we've seen some growth. On the computing side, on the server side, on the storage side, some great project happening in Poland, and it's great that you see the distribution channel being part of it, like server plus 60%, just to drop a number. But also on the PC refresh doing quite well, mobile plus 8 and desktop plus 25. So Nordics, they had a tremendous start of the year, if you remember, and we can see that in Q1 and Q2. A bit more muted in Q3, but still plus double-digit growth. Everybody would love to have a muted growth of 10%. And of course, it's once again the PCs that's driving this growth, as well as components. Now, let's move to a slide that I know most of you like. It's when we look at our top vendor in our distribution panel, split between value and volume. But instead of just looking at Q3, I look at year to date, and where we can see some tremendous growth across the board, mostly, especially on the software side. VMware still riding the wave of early, from the first part of the year, but also we can see that in other software vendor. HP also doing quite well. That's interesting. Like we see the appetite in data center and HP in the server side as well doing quite well. It's more difficult, as I mentioned, on the networking side, and we can see here the Cisco performance. I know there is new channel program being put in place and new directions, so still below the 10% mark here for Cisco. But if we look at a more positive picture in terms of vendor performance, it's obviously going to be on our volume side. Volume side, no surprise to see all the PC vendor doing extremely well. Sorry, thank you. That's what I was background nice. So the PC vendor doing extremely well. Look at HP, look at Lenovo, riding like on top here. Dell and Asus doing extremely well. So yes, the PC is driving these vendors, but as we've seen as well, monitor doing quite well and contributing a little bit to the performance on the volume vendor side. So with that was an interesting perspective of Q3. still positive, less than expected, because what did we expect actually in this slide between our forecast and what the actual happened? Actual was plus 15 on the personal system and plus 13 was our forecast. So a 2 percentage point variance. And as I mentioned before, that's coming from the desktop. The desktop keeps surprising us. Our forecast for mobile computing were quite spot on, but desktop, I think most people on this call are also surprised to see desktop keep growing and growing. And let's see what will happen actually in Q4 later. As I mentioned, software, that was where the big discrepancy happened for us at 9 percentage point differences. We were expecting bigger growth and not such, especially on the data management side, but we're finishing at -1. But for the rest of the top sector, is actually quite spot on to what we predicted last quarter. So well done, the team at Context, and hopefully we'll continue seeing more green moving forward. So let's actually move into our forecasts for the year and for the next quarter. We are currently refreshing all our forecasts. So I've got some preliminary data for some category later on. And also what I will try to do is to put our forecast in perspective with what we are saying from our reseller surveys that happened earlier this year. But if you remember, our forecast for the year was 5.3%. We may revise that slightly on our next iteration that will be published on the 6th of November. But to achieve this forecast of 5.3, we need a very strong Q4. We forecasted 5.6, but to achieve this 5.3, we need to do better by 1 percentage point. I know the refresh of PC is still happening. Some countries are behind, so hopefully we'll see that picking up in Q4 to achieve this 5.3%. Software and services also last year didn't perform so well in Q4, so there is room for growth as well on this side. And as I mentioned, peripheral also on the upward trajectory, so hopefully that will continue, especially on the monitor side. And we have also the computing components that have been doing well. So to achieve our forecast of 5.3, we need to see a 6.6% year over year. Right now, our forecast sits below at 5.6, but as I mentioned, we are reworking this and revising this. And we are actually conducting session as we speak and with external and internal session to validate our numbers that we'll publish on the 6th of November. But let's now look at, as I mentioned, our Channel Watch survey. Every year, we, thanks to our distributor partners, some of you on this call, helping us reaching out to reseller. So this year, we gather more than 6,000 answers from this survey. And what is interesting is to look at who replied, and it's actually very small to very small reseller. Quite interesting to get this view of the market when we know the SMR channel in our distribution panel is around 40% of the overall distribution panel. So it's quite interesting to hear from the little guys and see how they see the market going. Most of them focusing on the B2B side, but we still have also 25% on the B2C side. So how do they see the next 12 months in terms of outlook? And it's rather positive, very positive, at 64%, saying this next year to be, and the next 12 months to be on the positive side. And that's exactly what we are reflecting in our forecast when we see Q4 at 5.6, and we know Q1 and Q2, maybe especially the Q2 number with the Windows refresh being slightly delayed in some country, maybe a bit higher, but we'll see a positive outlook for the first half of 2026, in line with what the small and medium reseller are saying through our survey. So let's focus on now first on the consumer reseller. Where do they see the investments going? And no surprise here, a clear leader here is the PC category at 58% of participants seeing this as a growth category next year. So when we look at our forecasts, they are still to be revised, but I think they are quite finalized on the PC side. Maybe a couple of decimal point will change here and there, but the trajectory will remain as such. Still a strong Q4, plus 12%, but we will see still a refresh happening, especially in this small and medium reseller, and we should see still a positive growth in Q1, 8%, and phasing a bit down in Q2 at 6%. And as I said, like we're trying to publish our forecast for all of 2026. So in terms of mobile computing, if we look at year-on-year units, and this number will be presented back in 6th of November, we should see a strong 9.5% in our midway point here, growth in 2025, and still a positive 4.1% growth in 2026. So quite impressive considering what we're seeing already in 2025 to still go above this at 4.1%. So great year to come for mobile computing. Now, if we move into, I think what most of our reseller being part of this survey were focusing on the B2B side. The B2B side, the number one category was cybersecurity. Cybersecurity at 38%. We keep hearing day after day, every day in the news, a new cyber attack damaging any organization across the world and in Europe as well. We have Jaguar Land Rover in the UK not long ago, all the supermarket chain also in the UK not long ago. So cybersecurity is really in the forefront of mind for this reseller. And what we have been trying to do at Context, you know, we've been doing the forecast for the key categories, but what we're launching, and we're going to launch this in Q1, is our cybersecurity forecast. Nonetheless, I'm not going to let you wait until Q1. I'm going to show you what we are forecasting for the next few quarters. After a difficult Q3, we should see that a rebound in the upcoming quarter at plus 6%. And next year as well, still positive growth, especially in Q1 after a great Q1 last year to still be able to post a 5% growth. That will be great. So we're launching this in Q1. So bear with me. Next time I will have a bit more info on this when we have this executive summary with the GTDC. But nonetheless, that's something we are working towards. So if we look at the whole of 2026 for cybersecurity in terms of revenue, we're still bullish. I know we're going to finish the year on a positive note, but next year investments should still be going to the cybersecurity category. That both includes software and hardware, by the way, at plus 5.6%. But as I say, hopefully next time I will be able to dig a little bit more into this when I've got more numbers and more input from the team on this to be able to clearly address this key priority for the reseller in Europe, being cybersecurity. But I can't leave you, I can't not do a presentation without talking about AI. If we just look at the previous slide again, artificial intelligence tracking the top 5 this year. Like just to put that in perspective, 3 years ago, AI in this survey was at 8%, and now it's at 27%. So clearly they see a huge growth in AI, but are they ready for it? So when we get the answer from this reseller, actually the level of readiness is not there. So that's their own view on how they see themselves being able to deliver AI to their customer. The level of readiness, like level 1 and 2, below 50, 50% and above. And I know like the CEO of IBM recently said that it is the first inning of this game of AI and it's going to be a long way. But when we look at this number, I feel like the SMR and this reseller are not even in pre-season yet. When we see the have they started working on the AI concept with you on this call, with vendor, with distributor, the large majority is no. So they see a huge opportunity, and we've seen there is huge opportunity to take the AI market by the horn, but we need distributor and vendor to also engage not only with the big guys, but maybe that will come later, but also with these small vendors, the small resellers that seeing this as a huge opportunity for them, but not really there yet. So I think that's great to be in this forum, the GTDC, and distribution has a key role to play here, to be able to pass this knowledge, to work with reseller, to make sure that the 66% grow lower, decline, and the years grow higher, and the level of readiness move towards the number 5 number here. So that will be interesting to redo this exercise pretty soon. That's what we're gonna do and present that to you at some point as well. But interesting to hear from the little guy. So overall, Q3 was slightly positive, a bit less than anticipated. We still expect a strong Q4, and we still expect a strong end of the year, thanks to our personal system upgrade, thanks to also what's happening in terms of components, and hopefully software will be picking up as well. So with that, thank you so much for having me, Peter and Anita. And if you have any question, feel free to reach out to me or ask it now, and I will try to answer if I can.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. Yeah, really helpful. I have a question. Well, you mentioned AI, and I know it's hard to track, well, what a business is. Now, I know that in the past you tracked the number of AI PCs sold. Is that still a number you're tracking, and do you know what it is? Is it?
Yes, we're still tracking that. I don't have it to hand, but what key thing with AI PCs that we need to take in consideration is, of course, the share of AI PC is growing, but it's not due of the AI capability. It's just because there are more AI PC SKU out there. Like when we talk to people, it's like to end user, it's more because the products are available that the number of AI is growing. We see all the new NPU growing, the number of SKU with a high NPU growing, but it's still down to the availability of the product and the new product being there, rather than people going out there to buy AI capable PC.
With that, well, thank you very much, and well, have a good quarter.